So welcome, Tim. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
Welcome. It's great to have you here. So for our listeners, let's just get a little bit of an overview and an intro to Yonder and the journey that has brought you to be here today.
Yeah, so I'll introduce you what Yonder is first. So I'm firstly the co-founder and CEO of Yonder. We're building a next generation lifestyle credit card. Best described by a customer, it's as if Monzo, American Express and Secret London had a baby. So what we're really trying to do is give young city adventurers an opportunity to get rewarded, have a chance to be a tourist in their own city, and have access to a beautifully designed credit card experience that you'd expect from the likes of a modern neobank as well. And sort of powering at the back end of that as well is a way we underwrite where if you don't have a thick credit file, you haven't been in the UK for a long time as well, we use your cash flow data as well to underwrite you.
Okay, interesting. And talk me through the journey of how did this come about? Was this you're in the shower, you've had that moment that you thought off of this idea, or was it something that sat with you for years? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I wish it came as like one eureka moment. I'm always going to describe these as like lots of small moments coming together. So when I was super young, my dad worked at Hewlett-Packard, which for those who don't remember, was a very cool company. It was like the Silicon Valley company back in the 70s, 80s and 90s. So I was sort of surrounded by tech. And when I grew up, I actually grew up with one of the first in my group of friends at primary school to have a computer. I had the internet when in like 1998, had it really early on.
So you were ahead. You were like
down exposure. Tech, and then I still remember, I think I played like this thing called Jaybird on this like MS-DOS computer when I was like 5 or 6 years old. No. My mum gave me a touch typing book when I was 7 years old. And, they had a touch type. I also have Chinese parents who are sort of like, you need to achieve results and learn quickly. So I sort of grew up with that. And then sort of fast forward in my early sort of teens, I sort of played around with let's call it the internet, building the MySpace page, building websites and all that. And I was I'd say, not necessarily surrounded by entrepreneurship, but my dad had a whole bunch of books actually on the bookshelf, and there were biographies of the founders of HP, Hewlett-Packard, IBM, Sony, Microsoft, and for some bizarre reason, during the school holidays, I decided to just read them, and I was like, this is kind of cool.
What age were you at that point?
I think I was like 13 or 14. Wow. And I would like to pretend it's some intellectual reason. I was literally just bored out of my mind. And, I don't think I had that much to do. School holidays was super boring. So I think I just picked up a book and really liked it. And so I really liked tech. I liked the stories of people starting companies. So that was sort of early days of, I'd say, thinking about it, but never really had an idea or something to work on, if that makes sense. I kind of like the idea of starting a company.
Okay. And so it just naturally evolved from, your deep immersiveness in sort of the tech world. What about this credit space? How did you find yourself developing something?
Yeah, well, I'd actually say I sort of then got a normal job out of university.
Okay.
I think.
What were you doing?
So I just went to management consulting, and it was funny because I kind of joked that entrepreneurship out of uni in Australia was oh, you can't get a job, you can't get a real job, you can go be an entrepreneur. So I was like, no, I'm gonna get a real job. So I did consulting for about 6-7 years and got into fintech quite strangely through a project that I was on in Kenya. So as part of the consulting firm I was at, they second some of the consultants out to do some of the international development work as well. So I spent a year in 2016 working out in Kenya, and it was a partnership between a telco company, let's call it a fintech-ish company, the Kenyan Ministry of Health, the consultancy I was at, and also a NGO working in healthcare. And I was basically looking at how you could use this mobile wallet platform called M-Pesa and use that to power healthcare, education, healthcare, things and then explore things like healthcare insurance and healthcare disbursement as well. So I got into fintech in a very weird way in that M-Pesa, for those who don't know, is this mobile wallet product that's running on really old school telco technology. So for those who don't remember, back in the day, you had to get a prepaid SIM, you had to scratch a card, and you would type in this 24-digit number to top up your prepaid. Well, the business sort of built on a similar sort of USSD thin SIM technology, and it exploded though, where basically the vast majority of the Kenyan economy runs on M-Pesa as a primary way of spending. And this was digital banking in the early 2000s, before digital banking was a thing. So I saw that and was super inspired and excited by the power of, I guess at the time, it wasn't called financial technology, it was just sort of
evolving
a product
tech
thing, and the power of that to drive economic development. And if you look at the state of the Kenyan economy, you could definitely argue that M-Pesa had an important role to play in enabling like commerce, e-commerce, businesses to be built on top of these rails. And so I think that sort of for me became the spark of like, fintech's a really exciting place to be, and I want to be in it / building something in that space.
Yeah, nice. Arguably, people would say that, you know, the credit market hasn't evolved too much over the last years until now, and now is really booming. Can you talk to me a little bit about the strategies that Yonder has taken to really sort of disrupt a market, or, you know, be on track to disrupt a market that is arguably quite stagnant?
I always think about, I have a thesis around fintech coming in waves, and I'll sort of explain what that means. So my thesis is like fintech 1.0 was what we saw in the early 2000s, and that was really building the plumbing of payments. So if you think about PayPal, Stripe, Square, iZettle, a lot of these were all like, how do we make payments easier and more frictionless over the internet? Because there were so many issues with trying to pay for things on the internet back in the day. We forget that like buying something online was not normal 20 years ago. No. You couldn't trust it.
Yeah.
And then PayPal were like, hey, we'll give you a safer way to pay. We'll put a whole bunch of protection in there. And, you know, PayPal made taking payments on the internet far easier, so did companies like Stripe as well.
Yeah.
That unlocked sort of what I described as fintech 2.0, which is in the last decade, building, basically sort of unlocking a whole set of fintechs that would take, let's call it traditional retail banking products, and then make them like, let's call it digital first. So Monzo is a digital bank.
Yeah.
You know, TransferWise or Wise is really like a digital Western Union. And so a lot of these sort of fintechs built category-leading multi-billion-dollar businesses, sort of taking what was traditionally a brick-and-mortar experience and putting it on like a mobile app experience on a website. But what I'm really interested in is sort of this fintech 3.0, which is the next wave of products that's starting to build across, not just as let's grab a bank product and make it online, but kind of going, let's kind of reimagine that around a consumer vertical. And what I mean by that is like, if you think about it, you don't take the Eurostar because you love trains. You take it because you want to go explore in your city, and you want to go to Paris. And so actually every single financial product is really built around this idea of like, what is it allowing you to do and experience? And a good example of this is Klarna is actually much more a shopping product now than a classic fintech.
Yeah.
They make huge amounts of revenue now from actually the shopping sort of platform part of the business. And really, if you look at their marketing, it's a shopping experience now.
Yeah.
And we kind of think about that and said, wow, what if you could create that around one of the biggest spending categories of consumers, which is around like lifestyle experiences, around traveling, around eating out, going to theater, going to fitness experiences. Like, how do we really build something around that? It's the idea of like a deeply rich fitness experience, so lifestyle experience.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, do you know what the first ever credit card was?
American Express?
It's Diners Club.
Oh, I'm wrong.
It's in the name.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
You know, it's no longer that popular anymore, but it's in the name.
Yeah.
It was Diners Club.
Yeah.
And it's this idea around a club. And at the time, we all turned out this idea of like dining. And so we kind of looked at it and said, wow, what if you could sort of reimagine what that would look like in today's day and age as well?
Okay, interesting. And, you know, what sort of challenges have you faced when considering, one, you're trying to reshape an aspect of the credit market, but particularly you're trying to appeal to perhaps a younger demographic, is that correct? So you know, what challenges did that bring for you, or is that still bringing for you?
I think the difference with sort of our product versus the likes of a neobank is that, you know, you don't want to just willy-nilly try out credit cards for the sake of it. So it's a lot more thoughtful decision process, and so we've had to spend a lot more time investing in our brand. We also don't want to just build another fintech. Like for us, we really want to build a lifestyle brand as well, and so part of what that means is that we have to be a bit more patient. We have to really hold true to the brand values we have. You know, there could be shortcuts to get growth, you know, because you could just offer a cheap thing here and there, but like that's not the kind of product we want to build. And so, you know, for us, I think the challenge is that it means that growth is turn it on and all of a sudden people will come. It's actually being a lot more thoughtful about it. But it means on the flip side is the quality of customers we get is remarkably higher. The level of engagements we get is so much higher. And we've thought about, you know, our business model and our unit economics from day one rather than as an afterthought as well.
Amazing. I'm just going to pause and make sure that we can see both lines of recording on both lines. Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. And in the current economic climate, have you seen any shifts or pivots or impacts on your development of this product?
Yeah, so we're in I call it the triple whammy of the macro climate, because the three things that are more challenging for us building a consumer fintech is, one, the cost of living crisis does impact consumers, and obviously impacts the way we underwrite and think about affordability and how we think about just like general customer affordability. Secondly, we raise debt capital to fund the credit cards. We're not a bank, we don't have a balance sheet, so we have to raise financing from capital markets. That's gotten a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
And also VC money is more difficult to get as well, because as you have all seen, a lot of VCs are having big markdowns in their portfolio, they're deploying capital slower, so it is harder. But I think what that means for us then is that as we navigate this really tough macroeconomic climate, when the market turns, which it always will, and it always has historically in the last thousands of years, we always see cycles. It means that we're really well positioned to capitalize on that when the market turns as well and starts to improve again, which we're starting to see, I'll say, light at the end of the tunnel, with base rates starting to really stabilize. VCs are starting to start to invest again, and we're also just seeing it's a really good chance to really separate, I call it the startup tourists or the VC tourists, from the real ones who are really in it for the long haul.
And how did that journey look for you, your funding journey? A lot of people that come on here we'll have to cut that bit out. How was your funding journey for Yonder?
So I'd say my first round of funding was hard. First time founder, I'd never navigated the venture capital market before. There's a game you have to play, and you have to know how to play it. You need to have the network. It's really difficult when you're coming in cold. So our first round was very difficult. We were really lucky to bring on 2 tier 1 funds, local Globe and C Camp, who have backed the likes of Monzo, Wise, Revolut. So they really understood what we're building. And then our most recent rounds that were led by Northzone and another fund called RTP as well, we were very lucky that they were super bullish on the space. And I would say that our last 2 rounds have been challenging, but definitely not as challenging as other ones. And I think part of that is we really found funds who just get the space we're building in. And I think what I've sort of learned as well is that from a fundraising perspective, it's really about trying to find, I'd say, like investor company fit. As much as product market fit is important, investor company fit as well. And there are some investors who I have a conversation with, and I know they immediately understand the opportunity we're building against, they understand the proposition. And really, it's more about getting them over the line on, are we executing well against it, and are we the right team?
Yeah.
And some are just like, I don't get fintech, I don't get consumer fintech, I don't get the space. In which case, you're always on a back foot, and so I generally just don't talk to them anymore. And actually, it's really easy for us to now separate those investors from the ones who really get what we're doing.
And you mentioned your team there. So talk to me a little bit about building the right team. As you said, yes, the funding's on one side, but you need to lean on who's developing your product with you. Your co-founders, your team. So talk to me about that.
So I'm not unapologetic. Team is literally the most important thing in my experience. If you look at every single successful tech company, they're made up of people. And so for me, the core is how do we hire really well at the start? So because actually, if you think about it, when we were 3 people, if the next person we hired would represent 25% of the culture.
Yeah.
The next person after that would represent 20% of the culture. The next person after that would represent 16% of the culture. And so we thought about each person needs to be additive, because not only do they represent a large percentage of your culture, they will also then go and hire the next 10, 20, 30, 50 people, who will then go and hire the next 100 people, who will then hire the next 200. So it's actually like this flywheel effect that if you invest in it the right way, you get a positive flywheel. The trade-off there is you have to be very patient. So the first 4 months, we literally built nothing. We just hired.
Okay.
And we took forever to hire. I think we interviewed 150 engineers to get our first 2 engineers. That's not CV screen. We CV screen probably 300 to 400. And we said that these engineers will attract other great engineers. Yeah. So if we hire great engineers, it will be a flywheel. But how do you attract great engineers when you can't pay very well, when you have not a lot of runway, when you don't have a product yet? It takes a lot of time and a lot of patience, and we were very adamant that we wouldn't compromise. Anyone we would hire would be these are engineers that we would beg for.
Yeah.
Same with marketing, same with design, same with finance, all across our business. We were very much great people hire other great people. So be really, really patient, and don't settle. And it sounds easy, but actually the reality is that you have business demands, you have roles that are unfilled, and you want to fill them. But we said we would rather take the strain of having a role unfilled than fill it with someone that we don't think is good enough. But it's very hard, and we've spent a lot of time thinking about our interview process, how we train people on how to interview, how we give feedback on how we interview, how we do retros on when we've mishired, what did we do wrong in the interviewing process, what was right and what was wrong. And so I think like we're quite intentional on it, and I think I probably read 3 or 4 books before we even started doing our first hiring. So just really immerse myself in what's like, let's call it best practice. I don't know if best practice is the right way, but like how can I just learn from the best, because we're not the best, you know, we don't know how to hire, so how do we get really good at it, and how do we be really thoughtful and systematic about it?
And you talked about, you know, your people become your culture. What do you do within Yonder? Excuse me. What do you do within Yonder to, you know, toe the line on that culture and build that culture and encourage your employees to be a representative of the culture of your business?
So there's a couple of ways to think about it actually. I think the one there is we have like sort of like Yonder principles, and I always say that they are pointless unless you literally embed them in every part of your process. And then also the other thing I talk about is like just how we work as a team, and I'll talk about them very separately. So Yonder principles, we have sort of 4, and the way we interview people is we literally interview them against those 4 principles. That is a blind interview to your technical. So you can absolutely nail the job experience, but it is a blind interview to your values interview, and if you fail the values, you fail. You're not getting. And we've had many people who pass the experience but don't pass the values fit. And they're completely independent, and we spend a lot of time making sure they're really rigorous. And then when you join, we then reinforce them. So every quarter we do quarterly reflections. We ask you to reflect on how you act in line with our principles. Every week we actually ask people to call out their team members when they've acted in line with our principles. And in a day-to-day, we ask people to call each other out when we're acting not in line with our principles as well. So, you know, I can tell you one simple example. I was debating with one of the guys who runs product, and then he said to me, but Tim, look at the mission. That's why we need to do this. And it's this element of like you're constantly just banging it into the culture. We then also talk about like ways of working, and that's, I'd say almost a second level down below. And that's really like, we have simple rules such as like, if you're at a meeting, be present, don't multitask. So you can't be on your laptop doing something else. Cameras on,
phone on the desk,
and if you need to leave, just leave the meeting halfway. Like don't sit there and pretend to pay attention. If you don't get it, just walk out. And these are really small, but we realized we had to bang them in like day to day, to the point where we'll call someone out in the meeting. They're like, hey, do you need to be here? Or hey, you're multitasking, why don't you step outside and do that outside? And these are really small things, but I always say that they will slip unless you continue to reinforce them. And every culture slips by default, because what you're basically asking people to do is do what they're not normally comfortable doing, because it is like natural to multitask. It is natural to just sit in a meeting and like open up Slack and talk on Slack. So you have to like fight against it, which means you then have to like actively, quite frankly, police it. But that's everyone's job as well. And so I'd say it's a combination of language, it's a combination of patterns of like how you run your organization, but then also like what we do day to day, like continuously bang it in. And everyone goes to me, oh, like I noticed this has slipped. I'm like, yeah, it has, because it always slips. You have to keep fighting it. So, and
it's about that sort of percentile slip, right? So everyone talks about, you know, be 1% better each day, etc., which I love, and that's a great, you know, mindset. But it's like, if you aim to be, I'm going to be 90% good at those, you know, drumming into our culture. Well, if you aim for 90, then you'll probably come out about 75 or 80. So you need to try and put the top bar in, and then I guess that area of slipping becomes smaller, I guess.
I think people are just too nice. Honestly, people are too nice. It's awkward to say, hey, why are you multitasking my meeting? It's awkward. Or someone's on the phone, on a call without a camera on. And the reason why we ask that is really because we're like, if you're in a room, you would be visible. So you should be visible. Now, there's always exceptions, and let people know if you can't for whatever reason. But it's awkward. It's really awkward, and we just want to be nice. And I think we're always very much like, we're not building a nice culture, we're building a kind culture, but not a nice one. So bringing that back to your product, and in a sector where, you know, credit products need to work flawlessly, how does Yonder maintain high reliability, trust, accuracy within the financial services sector? Yeah, so it's really quite frankly, a lot of hard work and grind. I always say payments are easy. Payments are hard when it's down to the 0.01%. 0.01% doesn't sound like much, but 0.01% when you're doing 10, 15, 20 million pounds of transactions a month is hard, because that means your card doesn't work a TFL once.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, no, but the other 100,000 times it worked fine. But no, what was the one? And a bit of it is just having this culture of like the 0.01% matters.
Okay.
And it's pretty brutal, because it means that like literally we will go down to reconciling our financial ledgers down to the pennies at the end of each month.
Mm-hmm.
We will monitor if there is any sort of latency on the card working at a certain threshold. It'll wake up a backend engineer at 3 a.m. in the morning. Every backend engineer is on call 1 week on, 1 week off.
Wow.
Like since the start of Yonder, mobile engineers are on call on 1 week on, 1 week off.
Okay.
And it's relentless. It means that it's not fun getting a pager due at 4 a.m. in the morning saying, hey, there's been some latency issues, have a quick look at this, look at your P99 or this, there's an issue. That's not fun.
No.
But actually, if you want to build excellence, it's the grind, it's the discipline, it's the constant like pushing for that last 0.01%. And, you know, literally down to, I would go and reach out to, we had some issues at the time where our cards weren't working properly at Tesco automatic fuel dispensers. And no one could figure out why. We spoke to MasterCard, we spoke to a card processor, nothing was showing up on the network. And then I think I flew to Gibraltar with one of our partners, and they said, oh, we think we know what's happening. We think there's something on that the card's not working at the terminal level. So they need to do something on the terminal itself. So I'm like, well, how do I fix the terminal? So then I literally went to LinkedIn and messaged 20 people at Tesco in the payments team until I finally got to someone who was like, oh, we need to just add your card details to our terminal database.
Wow.
And that's just like one example
a simple
of
fix, but a really long process to figure out what was going on.
And I mean, everyone at MasterCard were like, well, no, your card's set up properly. You know, you could have just accepted second best, which is everyone said everything's fine. But customers were saying it's not working. So we've got to find the answer. And so you just keep going and keep going and keep going until you find it. So that's not fun, but I think for us, we take a lot of pride in that. And we always say that the 0.01% really matters.
Yeah. And if it's tough to get there, then, you know, the reward always feels better at the end. So, and, you know, speaking of listening to your customers and, you know, the people who use your products, rewards programs are often a really critical part of credit card offerings. So how has Yonder approached this aspect differently to, you know, complement lifestyles of young professionals that you're trying to target, you know, especially when you're up against lifestyle offerings from perhaps American Express or, you know, etc. Tell me about that.
So I think the first philosophy we had was don't ask customers what they want, because they always ask for paradoxical things. So every time we asked customers, we said, hey, what would you want? They're like, oh, I want cash back. But they're like, I like miles. I'm like, what? They're different. And they're like, oh, I want more choice. And then we go to them and say, how do you like the choice? I'm like, oh, there's too many choices. So actually, like, what you realize is that people are paradoxical. And I always like this idea of finding consumer products is almost like treasure hunting. And you're sort of looking for like weird behaviors that don't seem rational, but we love. And a good example of that is, why do we prefer to get a birthday present versus getting money? Now, this is very top of mind for me, because in Chinese culture, like you give money, like red packets. And my mum still literally wires me money for my birthday, still to this day. She sent me like £50, and like she gave me £50 when I was 15. She still gives me £50 to this day. And I love it, and it's funny. But obviously, it's just, I'm like, I don't need the money, mum. I have a job, it's fine. But I always go like, why does it feel so different than when, I don't know, my wife buys me like, I don't know, a Lego set as a joke, and it's quite fun. And it's like the same monetary value. And I realized that actually as people, what we ask for and what we think is high utility isn't necessarily what gives us joy. And so we always thought about experiences, which is like, what gives us most joy in our life? And how do we make sure we like really champion those joyous moments? So a good example, we love discovering new places to go. Now, no one would ever tell me that in a customer interview, but when you kind of dig into like existing consumer behaviors, everyone always has a friend they ask to say, where should we go for dinner tonight? How can Yonder be that friend?
Yeah.
So then, and what they're not doing to you is giving you a library of 200 choices.
Yeah.
They're giving you like, hey, there's 1, 2, or 3 places you should check out tonight based on where you want to go. So we're like, okay, let's bring some of that ethos in there. We also learned that people hated the coupon experience, where you go to your restaurant and be like, I have a 20% off dining experience, blah, blah, blah. We also know that the mental model of getting a holiday fully paid for feels very different than getting a discount off your holiday. So we're like, how do we start to bring in some of these sort of tenets of moments of joy into our product experience? So for example, we have 10 dining experiences a month, not 100, not 20, not 30, 10. And we handpick them and we stand by them and we tell you a story about them. Because we know that half of what's more exciting is not just the place itself, but the story behind the place as well. Mm-hmm. And we also want to pick places that you wouldn't have discovered without us. And then when you go there and you have your dinner for two experience, you don't have a voucher, you pay on your card. And it's a dinner for two covered on Yonder. It's not a discount, it's covered on Yonder, and you don't have to go tell the waiter or the waitress about this. You just pay on your card and you swipe and we fully cover the meal on you. And it's not even a cash back. So a lot of credit cards are like, pay first and we'll give you cash back. But I'm like, okay, now let's picture this. Imagine you say, let's go out for dinner tonight. I've got the check. But by the way, can you pay first and I'll wire you the money?
Yeah.
Feels different. It feels different. It's exactly the same financial transaction, but it feels different. And so even
same
down
as the present. Yeah.
Same as the present. So even down to the way you redeem your experience, you don't get charged for it. Yonder covers the bill. And so all the way down to these little details, we really were really thoughtful about how do we make each moment super delightful? How do we think about breaking the rules of what everyone else is doing? And it's funny because the reason why a lot of the bigger companies really struggle, because they'll do a market research study, they'll get a market research agency to do it and say, what do your customers want? Oh, they want cash back, they want flexibility. So then they'll load up the product with cash back and flexibility. Yeah. And then you go, but what brings moments of joy is none of those things. Yeah. And so we were really thoughtful about how do we flip these moments. And for us, a lot of the inspiration came from non-fintech brands. I use an example of Aesop is a really popular, let's have a really nice hand wash in your bathroom. It's kind of unreasonably, it's hand wash. Why does it cost £25? It smells nice, and yet it is really nice.
Special.
People smell really special, and it's something that you want to show off. It's a bottle that you want to show off. And actually, I always think about, if you want to learn about, in my experience, consumer brands, don't look at your industry, look at another one, because I think you'll learn a lot more from outside.
It's so interesting. And that's really good advice. And I know that you said at the beginning of your journey of being a founder, you didn't know anything, you didn't know what you were going into. What kind of advice would you have wanted to have heard other than the piece you've just given me? What else ties into that advice piece for you?
I think there's this really weird sort of comparison between, VCs will be like, when I interview or meet a founder, I want to vision, can they be the next Jeff Bezos, or can I see them running a public company? The problem with that is you sort of forget that it's taken them 20 years, 30 years to get there. And so we often look at people as they are now, rather than looking at trajectory. Yeah. And so we have a philosophy, both in terms of how we hire, but also how I think about the world, which is you just want to be better every day. Yeah. And your primary goal is not to solve the problem 10 years away from now, it's to solve the problem in front of you and to grow and learn from that every single day. And so even our hiring philosophy is we look at trajectory of learning, not necessarily static performance. And what that means is that we might forego a big executive hire because even though they might have the experience now, we don't feel like they have the trajectory of learning that we want at our company. And so the best advice I got was from another founder saying, just focus on being better tomorrow. Be a better Tim tomorrow than you were yesterday. Yeah. And if you just focus on that, you will continue to get to your point, incremental improvements every single day that compounds. Yeah. The thing is though, is that people say that, but they don't actually practice it. And practicing it is literally down to, we have some individuals on our team who literally diary regularly about their learnings. And that is a level of just reflective learning.
Discipline.
We ask the team to write a quarterly reflection, and I will tell our team to redo it if it's not good enough. Okay. That's not nice, by the way. But literally I'll say, what did you learn? Yeah. And if it's crap, I'll tell them, do it again. Yeah. And we have actually done it again to help people in our team when they've done a really bad reflection. Because I say to them, if you want to learn, you need to reflect. That is the only way to learn quickly. Therefore, you need to spend time thinking about what you've learned about, and you need to be really thoughtful about that as well. So that's something that we instill, and we always joke that mistakes are for learning, because we will make lots of mistakes, and we're really big on just learn. Don't make the same mistake, pick yourself up. What did we learn? What did we learn? What did we learn? And I think so far it's worked really well for us. It's something that we want to continue to instill in our culture over the many, many years ahead as well.
Nice. And I guess that's what keeps you going, right? I from what I've understood from our conversation, you're an avid learner and always have been. What else keeps you going? Because it must be really testing and really tough, being that, top head of the business, the founder, what keeps you going to do this, to drive Yonder forwards?
So I kind of think about it from like, there's both like in the internal world and the external world. I think like from an external world perspective, I think being able to look around and see the product we're building, see the team, and like, I guess get joy from that. And I'd say like, if you don't enjoy it, like what's the point? And so there's an element of, even down to learning, I'm like, I want to enjoy my learning. Otherwise, what's the point? You know, I'm in my 30s. I don't want to waste my 30s by just grinding through the next 10 years of, sure, Yonder does well and you might be financially set for life, but what's the point, right? Like the point for me is you want to enjoy the journey. And every fan I've spoken to who have, let's inverted commas, made it, have always said, don't forget to enjoy the journey along the way. So I think on the external side, the journey is enjoying the journey. I think like on the sort of on a personal side, I think there's an element of like what grounds you. And so for me, I always kind of say like, why are we doing this? Like, what's the point? It's like, why? And so I have like a personal faith, and that's a big part of like what anchors me. For my like team and management team, I'm always like, we really need to understand what's your why, because, and that could change. I think the key thing is that it's changed for me over time.
And it can, and it's okay if it does.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you have to have that, and we always ask ourselves like, why are we doing this? And every quarter or every so often, I'll be like, why are we doing this? Like, why am I doing this? And if I can't articulate that to myself, then I kind of go on a journey of like trying to find that new why. And I'll journal. I spend a lot of weekends like just reflecting on my own personal life journey, because I don't identify Yonder as me. And I think that's one thing that a lot of founders do, which I don't think is necessarily healthy, which is they are the company and the company is them.
Yeah.
I don't see myself as Yonder is me and I am Yonder. Like, I am Tim.
Yeah.
Yonder is an important part of my life journey, but there's a life journey that would hopefully be another 50 years ahead. Yonder will be an important part of that, but probably won't be my entire life. So how does this fit into this wider narrative of sort of this life that I want to live, and let's say finish my time on the world and feel like I've won a race that I feel very proud of. So I always think about it in that lens, and I think that it's really easy to just think about your company as the be all and end all, and I think that's actually healthy or right.
I agree. That's a really beautiful way of putting that. I've asked you a lot of advice pieces already, which I really appreciate. So I'm gonna finish our episode on pinpointing, you know, what would you say was your biggest challenge in your career or perhaps life today?
It was really random because it's not related to founding a company. I tried to move to Singapore multiple times.
Okay.
It never worked.
Okay.
And it was really bizarre. It was to go there to study, for jobs. I turned down a job because I had another job I was interviewing for, and then I didn't get the other job.
Okay.
It just wasn't working out. And I think what that taught me was, it was quite weird, because I think leading up to that point, I would say on paper, I was like fairly successful, right? Like I found getting a job at a university relatively easy. I was like, had like top marks in university. I got promoted relatively quickly in consulting. And so from the outside, people are like, oh, you're very successful.
Yeah.
But I think that I didn't learn failure. And I think actually trying to get to Singapore multiple ways and failing all the way through actually taught me far more than anything else. And I think actually that's now taken me to the founding journey, which is called lots of setbacks, actually sort of trust that the right door will open at the right time, but also you need to persist at it as well. Yeah. So that's kind of been for me. I think it sounds so cliche, like learning how to fail, but I think actually a lot of people who are competent and are successful actually really struggle to deal with these sort of setbacks. And I think life is full of them. Yeah. It's inevitable. And for me, it wasn't the founding journey that was the setback story. It was actually something far earlier than that, but that helped me prepare mentally for the journey of, you know, starting Yonder and going through the, you know, many no's and many setbacks. So yeah.
Amazing. And one last extra question that I'd like to know. You know, success, the markers always move, and Yonder have clearly been a very successful company and are on a successful journey so far. But, you know, what does success look like for Yonder, and what's the next steps, I guess?
I know that I will never ever feel like I've ever been successful, and I know that there's always I think that's what makes also founders slightly crazy but really good, because they're always demanding more. I think there's so much to celebrate success today, and there's also so much to do in the future. So I don't know if I could put a line in the sand saying, oh, this is success, because I think each of them brings new challenges and new opportunities. Like, I don't know, being a public company, that's not a milestone in my opinion. So that's a milestone, but that's not the end goal, because running a public company has its own new challenges, like quarterly earnings, earnings guidance, activist investors. You know, there's a whole sort of new challenge that comes. So I don't know whether I look at line in the sand saying this is success and this isn't. I think my philosophy is very much that celebrate each month, each year, each week for what it is and enjoy the journey along the way. And there's always lots of things to celebrate and there's always lots to do. But I don't know, I don't really have a moment of like, this is going to be success, because I feel like we're not successful and I feel like we have 100 things that I still want us to do and push harder on. And yet people on the outside say you're successful, and I'm like, I don't feel like that. Okay. And then I realized that actually maybe the right answer is to not think about success as this binary outcome, but to really think about it as a mindset of there's always something to celebrate. I'm always going to be thankful for my family. I can always be thankful for my friends. I can always be thankful for having what I need. I can always be thankful for the team, but I can always demand more and always expect more from us as well. And so I think holding these both in tension, that there was always more to do, but there was always much to be thankful for at the same time. So I don't know, very weird sort of philosophical way of thinking about it, but that's generally how I hold onto things.
It's a great way to look at it.
And so I don't know, when every time someone goes, oh, you're on this like so-called like TechCrunch or Sifted or whatever, I actually just don't care. I just genuinely don't care, because I go, this is fleeting. Because at one moment you could be celebrated, and the next moment you could be slandered, and not in a negative way. I think I just hold this very loosely, being these are moments that we can celebrate as a team, but these are not the end goals that we're pushing for. Yeah. That's not the end goal. Yeah. And so I kind of just don't care that much about the publicity and being on a pedestal, because I think that actually doesn't really reflect on what the journey is really like.
Yeah, sounds like you care an awful lot about the journey being positive for everybody in your business, which is a beautiful thing. So thank you so much for coming on to the Startup Diaries.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me.